Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Bring Your Big Energy podcast. I'm feeling hype. I'm sun kissed. I have a fellow Canadian on the line today. Life could not be better. So I have Mishkin with me. Good morning, Mishkin. Is today's guest, and he has lived a life that on paper probably should not have led him where he is today. So he has navigated countless intensity points that could have easily become the end of his story. Instead, though, they became the beginning of a completely different one. Y'all, he is so inspiring. I cannot wait to share him with you. I'm actually not even going to go into more of an intro. Mishkin, just start by luxuriously telling us your story about your intensity points in several of them and how they led you here to us today.
Well, thank you, Stacey. I'd be happy to share those. Obviously, being invited here is a huge honor, and I appreciate you doing that and getting to share my story. I hope it resonates with somebody out there because that's why we do these things. But it really starts off right from the get-go. I mean, I was born not in Canada. I was born in Kenya, 1984. So it was an interesting time. And of course, we moved back to Canada for a little bit and then moved back to Uganda. But when we first moved back to Africa, we went to Uganda. And that's about where I was 5, maybe 4 or 5. I remember it was my 5th birthday, but it was right after, quite a few years right after the country had gone through a lot of change. So the roads were a complete mess. There was no running water where we lived. There was no power. There was Idi Amin had just been kicked out a bunch of years before. And so it was quite a different country than it is today. And the reason we went, of course, is my father worked there. He was a scientist, so he worked for nonprofits. But, we talk about inflection points, and just growing up in a different country in a scenario like that is different. Now, I wouldn't say that's a horrible thing. It's an amazing thing. But at the time, Uganda, where we were, was right on the border of Rwanda. And it was a very different place. Like, there was a lot of beautiful things, but there was also a lot of violent things. And there was a lot of amazing people. But we also lost 4, 5, 6 friends that I can think of due to either disease or violence. So it was always just this sort of churn of you don't know what's next, right? There's many things I saw as a kid that I certainly shouldn't have. And to give you an idea, when the Rwandan genocide happened, we were about 40 kilometers away. For you Americans, that's what, 20, 25 miles, something like that.
The conversion, yeah.
Yeah, but you can imagine, or maybe 100, but you can imagine I could see the artillery at night, and my parents would say, oh, that's lightning, right? Oh, that's thunder. And you couldn't eat the fish out of the lake on the other side of the hill because there was too many bodies in that lake. And so for a while there, it was just horrific. The UN had moved in, and so we actually got to meet General Romeo Dallaire, who is the Canadian general who was in charge of the UN troops there. But just growing up, it's a different beginning than a lot of people have. And I'm not saying that as I personally went through extreme hardship. I certainly didn't in that respect, but seeing it is still its own form of challenge. Now, on the flip side, this is the contradiction you have. On the flip side, I remember my mother being Canadian, and some of the villagers came to her and said, hey, can you teach us to read? These were women. And she said, no, but if you bring a local teacher, I'll pay for it. Right. And so she wanted them to set up something of their own. And so they did. The next day, I think 20, 30, 40 women showed up with a teacher. So she did. She paid for the teacher, and they started to learn. Over time, that actually grew into the largest women's group in Uganda, fighting for civil rights, educating women, going around on tours. And when you ask my mother, she's like, I didn't do it. They did. Right. But I'm like, you kind of were the catalyst, Mom.
Yeah, you gave them something to get started. Yeah.
Yeah. But also growing up, I had 2 friends, and there was a lot of violence there because the 2 friends I had were from Kenya. They'd moved with us, but the local kids did not like us, did not like me. I was the only white kid except for an American. And so there's just a lot of fighting, at ages 8, 7, 9, sticks, stones, all that kind of stuff. So it was a bit of a violent, but also beautiful experience. Then when I moved to Kampala, which is the capital, it was just culture shock. I'd been homeschooled my whole time. My teacher had actually passed away from AIDS. And then we moved to Kampala, and all of a sudden I went to school for the first time. And it was an international school. So there's all these different kids from different areas, and I just did not know how to fit in. I honestly didn't, because up until that point, what experience had I had socializing? I hadn't really, right? It was my parents' friends, it was diplomats, it was the village kids. And so trying to acclimate to that was really difficult. And I found myself really second guessing, do they like me? Do they not like me? And I just couldn't fit in as a as a friend. And so that I think was also informative in my years. But then fast forward from Uganda, we all of a sudden moved to North America. We moved back to Canada, and I was about 12, 13 at the time.
Okay.
So talk about culture shock.
I
It
can't
took at
imagine.
least a year for me to make a friend. And I don't exaggerate it. I just didn't know how. And it'd be little things like where I grew up, if you insult somebody's mother, it's like throwing the glove down and you go out back and you fight. Every other insult's fine as kids, but if you insult somebody's mother, that's like the line. Move to Canada and you get kids on the school ground, insults fly everywhere. And I just couldn't figure out the dynamics, right? I couldn't understand, like, how do we, what? Hold on. So I got into trouble quite a bit and slowly started to build a little group of friends, which was great. I found too that once I got out of middle school and into high school, that shifted again because the high school I went to for the first year, grade 9, was horrible. It was school outside of Ottawa, and the principal would wear a leather jacket because he was worried about being stabbed. There was a railroad tracks on the back where CN had to come constantly to give talks about kids not being on the railroad tracks. There were several suicidal attempts that year. There was a Molotov cocktail thrown in the school that year. There was constant fights. So I wanted out desperately, and I skipped something like 80 days. I just hated it. And my parents walked through it one day and went like, this is a dungeon. This is horrible. I ended
Yeah.
up applying to another school that a friend was going to, which was out of my district, but it was a theater school. And so it was specialized. So I could go there if I got in. And I got in, luckily, and they said, if you skip any days, you're out, but you can come. So from grade 10, I went to there, thank goodness. And I kind of immersed myself in the theater side of it to keep myself out of trouble. But the next big inflection point really came when my parents decided they wanted to move back to Africa. And I was like, no, I'm not going.
So
And
how
so
old are you at that point?
I would have been 15.
Okay.
Yeah, around 15.
And you'd finally
And
just found your footing, right? You found,
right.
yeah, I kind of get this. I kind of belong here.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I have a routine. I finally have friends. I don't want another big dramatic shift. So I convinced them, or that's what I thought. I convinced them for 3 months to leave me behind, right? Now, I went decades thinking that that was my choice, that I had convinced them. And then somebody asked me in my 30s, they said, would you have left your daughter behind at 15? And I'm like, no, I wouldn't have. And it dawned on me. I'm like, wait, that was their decision, but I thought it was mine. But they did leave me behind, and they left me with where they thought I was safe. It was a friend's house, and I lived in the basement, but it was an unfinished basement. I literally put, cloth up on the ceilings to cover the beams, and it was a damp Ottawa basement, an old house. I put carpets down. I slept next to the washing machine. So when I was telling my wife about it, she's like, that's not normal, honey. I'm like, oh, really? But that is where things started to really slip for me because, yes, I got through high school, but I could sign myself out anytime I wanted. I had full reign over what I did. So there was zero structure in my life at 15. I could do what I want, when I want, how I want. And frankly, it's not necessarily the best recipe for success.
So what was the family like you were living with, if you don't mind me asking? Were
No,
they,
of course. So it
oh,
was a single mom. She had 2 daughters, and I was friends with one of them. And, I think my parents may have had an arrangement to help like pay for a little bit of food and stuff, but that was it. So she really didn't have the bandwidth or capacity to do much. And so I came and went. People would come and go, and it was a bit of a transient house. Wonderful people, but just no structure at all. So I could go out until 3 in the morning. I could do whatever I wanted, really, right? And that's when I started to experiment too with like drinking and parties and all that kind of stuff. And the first time I did that, I was like, oh, this is amazing. I really like this. This makes me feel normal, right? And so it became heavier and heavier as I went through high school. And yeah, it was just a really difficult time because as well, I would be at school finishing school and I would say direct a play and I'd have all my friends. They would have people in the audience. I wouldn't. And I remember distinctively thinking, like looking out, being like, yeah, there's nobody here for me, right? And that really does weigh on you as a person, as a human. So trying to get through that, I scraped by high school because in grade 11, I got diagnosed with learning disabilities. And then they threw me into another class where I was like, wait, what? So I felt sort of other than, and I didn't really get the support I actually needed. And so I kind of checked out and was like, I will do the bare minimum. So I skipped school while I signed myself out of school. I would get a 30% because I knew if I aced the exam, I could tip it up over 50%. And that's literally how I finished high school. It's just minimum effort, do what I have to do, get through it, good to go. And I left high school.
Did you know what was gonna be on the other side for you, or what was the catalyst to just skip through and be done with it?
I didn't know. I did get accepted to a bunch of different universities somehow. One of them was NTS, which is actually one of the largest, sort of most respected art schools in Canada.
Okay.
But I was like, who's going to pay for this? I don't want debt. And ironically, just to give you an insight into kind of how maladaptive I was at the time, the company my dad worked for was a nonprofit in Africa. They had a program that would pay for my education. I declined it because I thought, who am I to take away from a nonprofit trying to help people? But it's such a self-defeating mental approach to things. But that is what happened, right? I said, who am I to deserve that? And after sort of being alone, not having people like, of course that's what I'd think. Of course that's what I'd
Yeah,
think as a kid, right? So I
yeah,
declined it. I said, no, I'm good. And I didn't go to any kind of post-secondary education afterwards.
okay.
Yeah. Afterwards, I went out west and I decided, oh, just go get a job, move out to BC. The reason BC is that's where my family's originally from in Canada. So I moved to Victoria and I actually moved in with one of my brothers. I have 3 brothers who are all much older. So 7 years, 9 years, 15 years. And I moved in with him and his new wife. And of course, I was just this young kid out of high school, didn't know how to find work, did what I could. And eventually my brother said, hey, you're going to have to start paying rent because I wasn't finding work. I was trying, but I couldn't. And again, another sort of window into where I was thinking. I took that as a get out. So I literally packed up and left the same day. And I moved to an island and I lived in the forest. And I lived in a tent and under a tarp. And the whole thing that shocks me now is years and years, decades later, I talked to him about that. And I said, yeah, you remember that? He goes, I thought asking you to pay rent would motivate you. I wasn't
Right,
trying to kick you out.
right. Like, go
And
get
then
a job, bro, but you
right.
can pay, but go get it.
But my mind was like, oh, I'm not welcome into the forest.
Yeah,
Full self-supporting. I am the only person to run my own life. The world is not here to support me, right? Which is, again, just kind of that maladaptive approach. So I did that. I lived in the forest. I did get into drugs and alcohol at that point, which is really where that addiction story starts. My brothers introduced them to me. My friends did. And of course, where I found myself on that island was not the most reputable crowd, right? A lot of drinking, a lot of use, a lot of things like that. But I started splitting firewood for a living. I found somebody who needed firewood split, so I'd do that. And eventually I got a little place and I was working and I had a little cottage and it had an outhouse. Like, it was very rustic, but it was something. And, but again, like, I was so depressed. I was so beaten down. I was so just sort of desperate for anything. And it was maybe about after a year, a friend of mine had come visit from Ontario. And she was somebody I used to spend the summers with because we'd go to a camp together. And she was also somebody that I had a crush with as I grew up. And she came out and she spent some time out there and we kind of hit it off again. And it was like this breath of fresh air just came into my life. And there was like somebody who cared about me, somebody I could care about. And so she said, well, why don't you come back to Ontario? And I said, okay, no problem. So I moved out to Ontario and I was able to kind of curb the drinking and use at that point for a little bit, which is a symbol in itself, right? When you have connection, all of a sudden that becomes less important. And so in Ontario, I ended up working the summer at a bee farm and we hung out and that was fantastic. But then she went off to volunteer in India and I decided to join the military for a little bit because I had always wanted to go to basic training. So I did. I went to basic training and I was in Ottawa. I wore the red suits with the bear hat. And again, it was amazing because I got to do all of those experiences. I got to go, see what it was like if I could do it. And I was very good at it and they wanted me to stay after, but I didn't want to. And even in the interview, they said, could you kill somebody if you were ordered to? And I was like, probably not, right? It's just not in my nature.
thanks for asking.
Yeah,
Real
exactly.
quick, Mishkin, though, how do we go from, like, nomad, like, literally on an island, like, drugs and alcohol, like, starting to dabble in the addiction piece of it, to, like, something as militant as the military? So those are so far, like, literally on the sides of the spectrum. Like, how did that journey happen?
Well,
Do
I think it comes back to that I wanted to go to basic training because I wanted to see if I could do it. And it was almost a game. And ironically, it was almost this thing. I'm like, I've never had this much structure. This is amazing. I'm safe. Right. And I had people I could rely on. I knew exactly what was going to be happening every day.
Yeah.
And because it was so busy, I I was kind of I didn't have to think about life for 4 months. And it was only a 4-month period. It was reserves, and it was just a 121-day contract, but you did basic training for 2 months. But it's a complete jump, right? And you're going to see that with my life is that I have these complete 180s, which is indicative of not having structure when I was younger. You just kind of go with whatever, right?
Wow. Okay. So you do that for 4 months.
Yeah. And then
And
I
then,
had money. I had money. I'd done a lot of drinking, but you couldn't do drugs in the military. And so I had money. I had $8,000 in my pocket. And I thought, what am I going to do with this? And said, well, I'm going to travel. And I knew our family had connections throughout Africa. And so I found one in Ethiopia, of all places, where I could go and volunteer. And so I did. I bought a ticket, flew to Ethiopia. I volunteered there for about a year and a half, teaching English, using theater to teach English. And I helped a university master's student who is like studying beekeeping in Africa. I kind of was an assistant. I didn't do anything amazing. I just helped. But because I had beekeeping experience in Canada, I could transfer that there. And I also went to India for about about a month, because that friend who had visited me in BC was in India. So I went and reconnected there, volunteered there. And then we decided that there was a lot going on between us. And so maybe we'd want to consider marriage. And we talked about it and we ended up getting engaged. But then after a little bit, she said, you know what? I'm not ready. I want to go to university. I want to do a lot of things, which was a huge blow to me. Right. And again, I wouldn't say that my interest was healthy. It was more of like if somebody loves me, I'm going to hold on to that. So when she kind of walked away, I think it was the best thing she could have done, frankly. And I was just so like demoralized again,
right,
because it's almost like a repeat of like, oh, now there's nobody, right?
right.
Which is okay. I returned to Canada and I started working, and I ended up going to post-secondary education, another complete flip. And I did a year in college doing like outdoor adventure. So it was this program where you would literally spend like 3 weeks doing wilderness first aid. Then you'd go on sailboats. So you get all these certifications. But I was scraping by because at that time too, video games, drinking, and drugs had kicked in again. And so if I wasn't at school, I was partying. I was out until 3 a.m. And it was still manageable, but I could feel myself really being pulled down by it. I started smoking because a girl I liked smoked, right? Just like all the worst decisions you can make.
Well, they say like you are the people that, what is it? You are the five
You're,
people you surround
you
yourself.
got it. And I surrounded
I think
myself with
that's
people like that, right?
100%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And I ended up getting my dream job, though, out of it. And I worked on a tall ship teaching kids how to sail. And it kept me out of trouble because I was on the water 5 days a week. On the
Yeah.
weekends, yes, I was a disaster, but then I'd get back on the boat and I'd be okay. But I'm colorblind, so it was a bit of a dead end job because to get into kind of like captain's license, you can't be colorblind. So I wrote it for about 2 years and then I had to quit. But I met my first wife who had come to be a student who was from a college in Vancouver, and we hit it off. We became, girlfriend, boyfriend for a long time, but she was also into sort of all the stuff that I shouldn't be. So drugs, alcohol, going to festivals, and our relationship was really rocky. Like, she's a beautiful human with her own bags of trauma, and I had mine. And when you have too many bags and they don't fit in the car, don't
Yeah.
go in the car together, right?
Right.
So we did, though. And when I felt it was slipping, we moved to marriage, and we used marriage to try to fix it. And so we ended up getting married. But to give you an idea of how sort of nuts it was, on our honeymoon, she told me, oh, I've accepted a job in the Yukon. I'm going to go there in a week. And it's like, okay, I guess I'm packing up our apartment, right? So I moved up. And again, it was very toxic, because now you've got this relationship where she's up there following her dream. I'm just tagging along. But to give you an idea of how really dysfunctional it was, because I couldn't find work up there, it was a town of 400. She had a job. She's like, you're not pitching in. This house needs repairing. I said, okay, well, I'm going to charge you $15 an hour to fix our house. right? Like it was just so dysfunctional in that
Yeah.
way. And we loved each other. And that's the thing I want people to take away. Like we loved each other and it was genuine, but we didn't have the tools and we weren't equipped to live a healthy relationship.
Yeah.
And so after a bunch of years, I finally said, "Hey, I have to go back south. Are you going to come?" And she said, "It's unfair for you to make me decide between where I want to be and us." And it clicked. I was like, "Oh, that's what I've been doing for 4 years or 3 years." So
Yeah.
that was when we split. And to give some credit, like we split very amicably. She is now doing fantastic. I still am in contact with her. She is a beautiful, phenomenal human being. And so we were both able to kind of repair our own lives afterwards. But yeah, it was definitely really damaging because now I had been through like, hey, I've been abandoned by my parents. I didn't get to marry that person who I really loved. Now this has ended. And again, none of it was healthy. I'm not going to say like I was marrying material at that time because I wasn't,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
But it still affected me. And something inside me shifted where I decided from now on, I'm not going to be hurt by anybody. So I became your classic toxic male in relationships who would manipulate. I still wanted the connection, but if it got too serious, I would sabotage it. I became a real piece of work, frankly, when it came to relationships. And that would have been in my mid 20s, but drugs and alcohol became way more prevalent at that point. I started working in sales, which meant I could fund my habits. I moved back in with that original brother who I had moved in with, but at this point he was divorced now. So I lived with him. And this was where something really interesting happened. It was 2012 now. And I remember him looking at me and saying, "I'm really sorry." And I said, "Well, what are you sorry for?" And he said, "Don't you remember?" And I'm like, "No, I don't." And then he basically reminded me of a trauma that he had inflicted on me as a kid. And it was like all these images came back into my mind of the event. But up until that point in my life, if you'd asked me if something like that happened, I would have said, no, of course not. So it was just this really weird out of body experience to have that flashback
Yeah.
and to go, oh my goodness, that happened. And I'm not going to say what it is because
Yeah.
obviously there are many different traumas that people go through. This is
Yeah.
one of them. And I forgave him right on the spot, but I had to do a lot of healing inside. But that still drove a lot of what the rest of my life would look like. And so, yeah, I got to the point where I was really unhealthy. I would probably be going through, I don't know, a few $1,000s a month in substance use. I would be grating my teeth at 3 a.m, wondering if this is my life. I remember at one point looking up treatment and seeing the $60,000 price tag and going, there's no way I can afford that. And I can't ask anybody for that kind of money.
Right.
So at that moment, I remember really thinking like, I'm trapped. I
Yeah.
am stuck. I am living this life with this substance use that I can't control. I'm
Yeah.
miserable and help is out of reach. And that is truly how I felt at that point. And then, as you know, cycles repeat themselves. And I hung out with somebody for 2 weeks. It was a girl and she was from Toronto. And the whole pattern repeated. I latched on, right? And I ended up moving out to Toronto to live with her. And I sensed there was some alcoholism within her. So I could kind of use that to keep my life habits going. But now I had somebody to do it with. And I moved to Toronto in 2015, giving my brother no notice of my departure, really. So he's now stuck with like all rent, right? And I moved in with her. And again, like I just wasn't a healthy partner at all. I would bring home alcohol every day. It was about 6 months before I got back into hard drugs and I hid everything from her. And eventually, 2017, she kicked me out, rightfully so, because she caught me on some of the using. And that was the first time where other than living in the forest, being homeless, where I used to like go behind the grocery store to get food because they would throw it out back. I
Yeah.
was now on the streets of Toronto, still had a job. I had a company car, so I slept in the company car, but it was really this like, oh man, where am I in life, right? I
Yeah.
am, I remember thinking, am I really that person who needs to be kicked out, right? And the answer was yes, it was, and she was within full rights to do so. And it was also winter, and I remember at that point it was my lowest. That's where I really hit that rock bottom. And I remember sitting on the side of the lake, drinking, saying, if I just swam out, maybe I wouldn't be able to come back. Right. And it was truly a contemplation because life at that point was not worth the pain that was going on. But I thought to myself, like, there's no way I can have my parents bury me. That is probably like the most selfish act I could commit. So I did call and I said, I need help. Hey, by the way, I'm a full on drug addict, which they had no idea. Many people didn't because I hid it well. Even my employers didn't know, right? Somehow I kept a job through all of this. And yeah, I mean, during that time in Toronto, I got into the rooms with the wrong people. There was periods where if a policeman had walked through that door, I would be in jail for years. Not that I was behaving or acting on crime, but I was around people who were. So within association, you know, you're going to get something. I actually never committed crime in terms of that life somehow. At one point I contemplated it, but then I actually decided to drive out to the countryside, get kittens, bring them into the city. Then I would sell them online to people who wanted cats because I did a business analysis and I said, this I can't go to jail for really. And it pays better than actually dealing drugs. And so that's the route I went, which is how I got more money to keep my habit up. Because at that point it was in the thousands a week in terms of just using and all the stuff. So now I'm in a position where I can get help. Amazing. What happens next, Mish? This is where you fix it, right?
Yeah. Not
No.
always. Not
Not
always.
always. I
Yeah.
ended up going to, I went to a support program and I thought, oh, this is it. And I kept going and I kept going. But it was 3 months of me just face planting. Like I couldn't get past a day or two without using. And I would literally be at the support group with people trying to help me, texting in the bathroom for my dealer so I could go get stuff after. And it was just this train wreck of 3 or 4 months of me homeless, working, doing this, still not able to break the habit, thinking, oh, it's me. Like it's a willpower issue. Oh my goodness. Then I got an apartment because I saved up enough money somehow. And there's no furniture in it, just a mattress on the floor and some dishes. That was it. And I thought, oh, I fixed everything, right? Well, anyway, I was not able to keep that. And eventually I got so sick and I got so worn down that I finally called somebody who was trying to help me. I said, I think I need more help. And he said, yeah, you do. So he ended up driving me to a detox center. And that was the first time I'd ever been to any kind of medical facility or any medical profession. And I was 160 pounds. Just to give you reference, I'm 6'4". I should be 200, right? Even 200 would be me lean. So 160 tells you kind of the health I was in.
Yeah.
And I went to this detox center and it was a inpatient 2 weeks. And when I walked in, I was just so out of it. But the nurses said, hey, if you're here, do you want help after? I was like, what do you mean? I said, well, if you really want it and you follow all the rules here, we can probably get you into a treatment center. I said, I can't afford it. He said, there's government programs. We have government treatment centers. And that was the first time I realized, wait, there's help, because in Canada, treatment centers are covered by the government in a lot of provinces under our healthcare system. And there are private ones, but there's also a lot of government ones. And so I was like, yes, what do I need to do? Because it was the first time I realized, oh, I went right back to that, 2015 moment of like, there's no help. I'm in prison to wait, there's an out. Holy smokes. So I took it. I did what they asked. They said, this treatment center, you have to quit smoking. I said, no problem, done. And I ended up going to my first treatment center, which was a 3-month program, residential. You're locked down. You can get passes after a month to go out for the weekend. But I was so scared of going out that often I would cancel my own pass because we were still downtown Toronto. I could see drug deals going on in certain parts of the city.
Yeah.
And I was not trusting of myself, right? Because for how many decades now have I lived in a way making the best decisions I could, and they were terrible, right?
Right.
So I had no trust in myself. I had no faith in myself. And again, rightfully so. I remember I went into such a sort of emotional psychosis that I ended up doing self-harm. And it wasn't because I wanted to hurt myself. It wasn't anything else, but like physical pain was familiar. Emotional pain wasn't. So somehow I was choosing physical pain because that was more comfortable, right? And that tells you again, kind of the depths of where somebody can go. And finally I told them, I'm like, hey, this has come up. So we corrected it and we were able to stop it pretty quick, but it happened. Yeah. And it was because I wanted to change how I felt. And that's why I used. That is the reason that most people end up using substances, is they want to change how they feel. But it's a downward spiral because you use, now you feel terrible, withdrawal, emotions, guilt, shame. So now I use more to cover that up, and it compounds, right? So Finally, I had 3 months of not using anything. Holy smokes. The counselors said, you can't go yet. You're not well enough. And I was like, okay. They said, we have a sister program up north. It's 6 months. We want you to go there. It's like, okay, whatever it takes, right?
You
I
took the help.
submitted all of my freedoms to get this, and I went up there. To give you an idea, the program had about a 10% success rate. And not to say that those people who don't succeed won't come back and succeed at some point, but if you have 30 people in the program, 3 to 5 might actually make it through 3 months. But other people can come back. So overall successes are higher, but I still saw a lot of people not make it. Quite a few died. When you're in addiction, a lot of people die. But I went to this program and I ended up relapsing halfway through it. I told them I was going to, because again, I was just so squirrely. I said, I'm leaving. They're like, why? I need to use. So I left. I had a week, 2 weeks where I went into a bit of a psychosis. After that, a friend took me to detox again, and I called them and they said, you can come back and finish the program. And I said, really? Like, yeah, you were honest with us. So come on back. Right. And so I did. I went back and I completed the program. And that's really where life changed. I was able to get into a 11-month program where I had supportive housing. So it was like subsidized. There was a social worker. You still had to pee in a cup and test yourself every week. And so it was very much like the next steps to being an adult. A dear friend of mine now, she's probably, I think she's in her 60s. She would come visit me every day at treatment. And she was the mother of a friend of mine who my parents had contacted to be like, can you visit her? Because they were in a different part of the country. Or can you visit him? So she would come every week and just sit with me and talk with me. And I kind of consider her my being human 101. She was the first friend I really had. And I didn't trust her for the longest time. I was like, what's your game? What's your angle?
Yeah.
But eventually I'm like, no, this is just a person who cares. Oh my God, that's what life is about. Holy smokes. And we're still dear friends today. She introduced me to my now wife, and my wife met me when I was in that residential treatment center, and we were just friends for a year or two after. But once I got out, I just started doing a minimum wage job at a nonprofit part-time just to get back into the rhythm of things. I filled my calendar with friends and social, and I still had a lot of work to do. I was certainly not cured, but I was getting better, right? And that company said, oh, you have a lot more skills. Because at that point, I had done carpentry. I was good at sales. I knew how to work systems. I did business plans for selling cats. Like I had some experience.
If
Right?
nothing else, a jack of all trades, for sure.
Exactly.
Entrepreneurial spirit, for sure.
Exactly. So they taught me they asked me if I could help with their sales process. So I did. I rebuilt their whole CRM. I rebuilt their sales process. I ran it for them. I made it repeatable, and that was able to build some of their membership. I got married. We started saving for a home, and we were in Toronto until 2021. And that's when I had my daughter. It was 2020. And we had saved up enough for a house. So now it's been 2 or 3 years of clean and sober. And we left to Nova Scotia, where we had been planning to move for quite some time. And we ended up buying a place here, which was a starter home, and it was fantastic. I couldn't keep that job, so I moved into another job. And I'd been doing a lot of reading, a lot of books. I'm somebody who likes to study all the time. So I had a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience, but no formal education. But I was still able to get a job as a product manager for this tech company. And so I did that, and I was very successful at it. But I remember looking at the company going like, there's so much broken here. It was a 26-year-old company that had a lot of old garbage, a lot of good ideas, but there was just a lot of things broken. And I said to them, you don't need me right now. What do you mean? Well, I love my job. I want to stay, but you have all these other things to fix before a product manager is even useful. And they're like, So then I got pulled into a room, and they said, if you could fix things, how would you fix them? And so I just started laying out over months. I said, here's what I see. And again, I'm not an executive. I'm not a master's of business, but I laid out all the things that I saw because I'm very good at solving problems, very good at seeing dynamics and people. I laid it all out, and then they pulled me into this committee to help kind of reorganize the company. And then at the end of it, I'm like, well, I've eliminated my job, but hey, that's great. And then they go, would you like to be the director of this part of the company? And I'm like,
Wow.
okay, right. So I did.
Yeah.
And I was able to rebuild their sales pipeline. I was able to negotiate new contracts with major players like California Highway Patrol, CN Rail, Black and Veatch. There was a project that was so under and so behind that the project was supposed to be about 4.5 million over 4 years. They were on year 6 and I did our money finances and I saw like we're already losing money by, and I said, this has to change. And I looked at it and people were so stuck in their ways. I just said, okay, we're doing a stop work order. And people are like, you can't do that. They've threatened us legally. Like, we can't do that. And I said, we have to. So I did. I made the call. Even the CEO was like, I don't know, I'll trust you, but okay. So I did. And of course, it was a huge reset. And it had everybody, all the executives from these big billion-dollar companies come up to visit us in Nova Scotia. And I told them, hey, come on up. We need to make a decision together. Either we go to court or we figure out a way to make this project work, because right now it's not working for you. It's not working for us. That's the only goal, for you to come up. Let's make that decision. I'll give you all the facts. So they came up prepped, and some of them wanted to make other decisions. I said, no, we have one decision today. That's it. Do we try to fix this or do we go to court? And so I laid it out for them. It was an 8-hour call with them up in the room. And eventually at the end of it, they're like, yeah, let's fix it. And so we were able to swap around from waterfall to agile. I put in a new team. They put in a new team. We had weekly calls with, their president, with me, and ended up securing an extra $3 million in funding and wrapped up the project in a year. And they were happy, right? Like, everybody was happy. Like, oh my God, it's fixed. But that's the kind of stuff I got to do after all this. And I was so excited to do it. And so
Yeah.
I got to work for that company for quite a few years as an executive. And then I decided I was done, mostly because my values weren't being met in some ways. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about values, but one of the things that really stood out for me is that the only way I was able to recover from my mental health and addictive challenges was living within my values. And the reason being is that when I don't, there's this hole that starts to form inside of me, whether you call it guilt, shame, whatever you want to call it. That's a uncomfortable feeling. It's like when you lie to somebody and you know it, and it's just so uncomfortable. But that uncomfortability is a risk for me because I want to change how I feel fast. And my brain knows how to do it. It reaches for something, a substance, because it will chemically change how I feel the fastest way possible. And so if I'm ever in an uncomfortable position like that, I have to resolve it quickly. So the best thing for me is to live within my own values. Otherwise, I put myself at risk. And so it's kind of an advantage in a way, because it means I get to live a better life, but I have to manage that. And it means sometimes making hard decisions. So I did make the hard decision to leave that company. And I didn't really know where I was going or what I was going to do, but I did start building my own company because I thought I would like to live the way I want to live. I would like to have a company that does the things I want, the way I want them to be done. And so I did that. I built it over a year. And now I have my company, which is fantastic. And I also now work part-time with a local organization that has youth shelters and supportive homes for people 16 to 24, because I think back to, if I had had that, what would my life have looked like? And so today I get to work with teams, which is phenomenal. And I also get to work with people who are going through something similar to what I've been through, even though it's their own journey, their own story. And it's a privilege to be able to do that. I've been able to buy more property. I've been able to create a life. I have an amazing family, a beautiful wife who is somebody I admire beyond belief. And I have a daughter who I'm enjoying watching grow up and taking her to soccer and just all these things, right? But I just never thought that I would have the things I have today, 10 years ago. And now it's been about 8 years, 9 years of me being on what some people call the right track. But it's amazing what's been able to happen with this sort of new way of life, which is really just values-based and taking life on life's terms, which is an acceptance piece, not trying to change the things that I can't, as some would know. But it's been remarkable. And I wouldn't change any of it at this stage. I certainly wouldn't.
Well, and what I love about your story too is I remember when we briefly talked before, and I remember, investigating you and going through your website. What I love so much is you own your own company, and right there on your website, you're like, I was homeless. I battled addiction. I have been through hard things, and I feel like that vulnerability in that clarity of owning and saying, like, you're not defined by your circumstances, is so powerful.
Yeah.
And I feel like if more of us did that more often, oh, what a world it could be. Because if
Yes.
we're all sitting here from a place of like perfection, we're all guarded and we don't grow. And so I do want to get into values piece, because one of the things that you shared with me that really stuck is that the idea that addiction is just a blanket covering those values. And so, if you think about who you were under those addictions, what values survived even during those very darkest moments?
So I would argue that values don't go away. And here's what I mean by that. Actually, there's a really good story of when I learned this. And this is directly where it comes from. I was in a facilitated group. I was one of the people in recovery, and I was in a room with maybe 15 other people going through their own versions of recovery from addiction. And it wasn't all substance. Some of it was gambling, some of it was work, but it was a facilitated group to kind of help people overcome whatever addiction is manifesting, because addiction is a solution to something. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it, right? It gives us something. What is it giving me, even though there's all these negative consequences? But the facilitator took a whiteboard out and said, okay, what are the things that are most important to you in life? What are your values? And people started saying all of the stuff that I bet if I asked you would be similar: honesty, family, loyalty, respect. It was the same stuff that I would find in the boardrooms when I was an executive. People wanted to be heard, respected, loved, cared for. They valued honesty. Then over top of it, he just drew this big blanket bubble thing and said, addiction. As long as you are in addiction, active addiction, it is really hard to act on these things. Why? Because it's such a powerful force. So, for example, when somebody is in acute withdrawal from a substance and they're in this emotional pain, they are going to lie to get their next fix. But the problem is they still have that value. It's still there. And when they lie about it and then go on their way, it erodes their self-worth, and which makes life even harder to bear, which means I'm going to use more, right? So it's this blanket over top of values that haven't gone away. But when we as humans, I've found, act in ways that are against our values, it erodes our self-worth and our ability to cope with life in a positive way. And so that's what I mean by addiction is a blanket over top of values. And I guarantee you, the person who is the most far gone in addiction still has those core values. And one of the reasons they're drinking is because they're so ashamed of how badly they've abused them.
Yeah. And so it does so you've kind of, it's been such a journey. So you've painted this picture of like not having safety, of feeling abandoned, of not having structure, but really this erosion of like self-trust and
Yes,
self-worth. And so
100%.
people out there listening, even if it's not, addiction's not their thing, right? Maybe it's perfectionism, maybe it's achievement, maybe it's distraction, whatever the things are. What is your advice to the listeners or people watching on YouTube potentially, around self-trust and self-worth? Like, can you get that back, and how do you do it?
Yeah, you can, but it's work. And I'll say I still battle with it today. Here's a great example. My wife compliments me. Do I deflect and go, oh, well, no, you're the best? Or do I accept it? And some days I deflect, some days I accept it. Everybody listening to this has probably had that moment where they've gotten a compliment and it feels awkward. That's your sense of self-worth fighting, right? Because I don't believe what she's saying in that moment. And so I deflect. And that is a form of self-worth. So really working on just like, how do we talk to ourselves? How do we see ourselves? Do we trust the people around us if they're healthy people? When they say something good about us, do we actually listen and fight that urge to deflect it? Those things matter and they really build up. I'd also say like professional help can be wonders, right? If people are willing to take that risk. But somebody said to me once, and it was that friend I talked to about who would visit every single day. And she was a religious person. So this, you can swap the word she used for whatever you want. But I was really, again, just like completely defeated. It was early days of addiction. I had no self-value. And she looked at me finally and said, if you could see yourself the way I see you and God sees you, all of your shame and guilt and self-loathing would vanish, right? And I think about that too. Like, I think about my wife. If I could see myself the way she sees me, I would think of myself a lot better than I do today, right?
Yes,
Because
yes.
I'm still on the journey. I'm not cured by any means, and I don't think I ever will be, because it's this journey of building up and becoming better and better. So recovery for me is recovering those values and then trying to live life by them. but I'm certainly not perfect, and I have to fight and work at it today too.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know you're familiar with my process, but in my book, The Spark Process, and the A in this is really around abandon. And because to be transformative in our lives, to live the unconventional or inspiring lives that we want to live, we need to get rid of some stuff. And so, what did you need to abandon from your earlier years to create this beautiful life that you have now?
I had to I'll kind of work backwards, I think. I had to abandon my relationship with substances and change it. I had to abandon the idea that I'm not responsible to other people because, again, my life for so long was me, and I'm going to move through the world by myself because I didn't trust people. I needed help. I had to ask for help. And today I still ask for help because help is so important. Like, whether it's professionally, whether it's personally, whether it's just doing the chores around the house, I need help, right? And being able to ask other people to join in a team effort and collaborate on something, asking for professional help if there's mental health like whatever it is, asking for help is massive. So getting rid of this I can do it, I'm going to do it by myself sort of so lone wolf mentality was one of the biggest things. And as well, just abandoning, not abandoning, but putting aside the maladaptive sort of beliefs I had about myself, which was you're not good enough. You don't deserve this. It's like when I turned down the college thing, right? Like I don't deserve that. When somebody left me, oh, it's me. I'm the problem. No, right? Like those are all just constructs of a unhealthy mind, and understandably so. They're defense mechanisms of a child who grew up in a very different way and needed them. They were healthy at a certain point, but eventually they became unhealthy. So how do I change those? And they still rear up. They poke their head sometimes. And I go, oh, I know you. Let's put
Yeah.
you back down. No, no. Right. Which it's
Yeah.
that story of which wolf are you going to feed? Right. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
And
that's my next question is around, okay, you get the results, which is the R in the spark, but you get the results, but it's really, really hard to have great results over and over and over again. Sustainability on any wolf that we're fighting is really freaking hard. So what advice do you have for folks that are like, "Oh, I ate good 2 days, and then the 3rd and 4th days I did bad," or again,
yeah,
maybe it is addiction for some listeners. What is the wherewithal to keep going, resilience over and over again that is sustainable to get the life you want?
I'd say it's you keep getting back up and trying again. So this actually this is how I ran. This is how I ran the teams I built. And I'd say to them, perfection is never going to happen. You know, now in work, we would be working on this software, and guess what? Every week there's a new bug, there's a new problem, there's a new this. Oh, we're going to try to do this project. That didn't work. Cool, we learned something. So it's flipping the script from, oh, I failed to, oh, I learned something. It's an experiment. Life is a series of experiments, and I see it that way so highly because, yeah, let's say I want to go and get health, like I want to lose a little bit of my belly. Cool. We all know the formula.
Yes, we
Eat
do.
a certain amount of calories,
Yep.
exercise for an hour every day, and this will happen over time. It's almost a guarantee biologically. But doing it, oh my God, doing it is hard. Why? Because we have to find something that's workable. And everybody's workable is different. And we've talked about the word workable, and that's where I come from. I don't believe in perfection. I look for workability. So I'll look at something and say, am I succeeding at it? Yes or no? Okay, great. But is it workable? Like, is this working in my life right now? If the answer is yes, great. If the answer is no, what tweak or experiment do I want to make to it to have it work for me? And that could be, I like the idea of a bicycle. You can have a bicycle that's like mint condition, perfect, amazing. It's the nicest bicycle in the world, and it is perfect until you ride it, right? And then it starts to degrade. Of course it does. Why? Because you're using it. And eventually you have to take it in and have it tuned up. And it's never going to be perfect again, but it will be workable. It works. And the only time you'd take it to tune up is either preventative or because something broke and you need to make it workable again. And I see life very much the same way. Our relationship with my wife, it's the same thing. Is it workable right now? Hey, are things working for you? Yeah. Me? Yeah. Amazing. Hey, are things working for you? This one thing's been bothering me. Okay, let's talk about it, right? Same thing at work. Hey, is it working? Are we hitting the goals we want to hit? Do you feel happy here in your role? Are there things that we need to talk about because for you it's not workable? What's happening, right? And I really love that word because it takes away this need to be perfect and it turns, mistakes into learning moments where we can really just revamp and reiterate.
Yeah, I love that. I see perfection as like this glass cylinder up on up on a shelf, whereas workable is more like a malleable, like a clay. It's like, okay, we can reimagine, which is very freeing, which I love. So I know we're almost at time. I know we haven't got to talk a lot about the work that you do now, which is about teaching communication and negotiation and helping people struggle with difficult conversations. So why don't you give us a little plug on what you're up to now and where people can find you?
Absolutely. No, I right now I'm really privileged to I work with companies, usually medium size, who are wanting to up their skills when it comes to interpersonal skills, negotiation skills, and really having the tools in their belt to have difficult conversations with customers internally. But my approach is really on the understanding that you can have a negotiation or a conversation where everybody's dignity is upheld in a room. And it goes back to that everybody has values, everybody has inherent worth. Can we respect it and have everybody leave with a win win scenario? And the answer is yes. And I've studied it, I've done it. That's how I turned around multi-million-dollar deals because everybody in that other company, when we were all at each other's throats, by the time I was done, people were like, well, let's go out for lunch. I want to stay in touch, right? It is really a fallacy to think that you can't have a scenario work out where everybody wins. And so that's what I teach. And I do it in the form of workshops. I do it in the form of keynote talks. And I also do it in the form of, custom sessions with people. But I like to sit down and really understand what's going on in your company right now that maybe I can help. And if I can, amazing. If I can't, I don't. I never accept payment until I've delivered and I've actually had a debrief because I don't want to be paid unless value's been delivered. And that's something I like to do because it aligns with my values. And then as well, I really, really just enjoy watching teams grow. And most of the scenarios I've had have come down to one underlying thing, which is somebody cares about a team. They really care about it. They've built it. They're a founder, they're an owner, they've built up this team and they don't want to damage it, but they know there's something that needs tweaking or they know there's some unspoken thing, but they just don't know how to approach it. I've been able to come in and work with that person and their team to fulfill that, but have everybody's dignity respected and have the team tighter after. So it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. And you can
I
find
love
me at my website, which is cyrmethod.com or cyrmethod.ca. And I'm always willing to chat. So
Perfect. And I'll put everything in the show notes so that people have access to it. And I just want to close out with saying that it is so great to talk with you because I think so many people say we're defined by our circumstances, we're defined
mm,
by our experiences. And a lot of times people say it in a negative way.
yeah,
And I love the way you've turned your circumstances into a way to be able to be the only person that can do the work now. Because
right,
that's very much how I feel about the world I'm existing in as well, is I'm uniquely positioned because I've been through the ringer
right.
over again,
100%.
and that's what makes it so powerful. So I'm going to end this here, but thank you so much. It has been such a pleasure. I know that we're forever connected now, and I just really appreciate you sharing everything with us today.
Thank you, Stacey. Appreciate it.
Thank you.